Hello, welcome back. This is a very spontaneous video we have going on here today. I had a meeting earlier which I got ready for and that went fine, and I was laid on the sofa afterwards having a rest because chronic illness life, and I was looking up at my bookshelf and I thought, it's nice lighting, I've got my face on, I feel alright, I'm having an okay symptom day, I should film a bookshelf tour. So very random, but I popped it on Instagram, people wanted it, so I have no idea what I'm doing with this, but I thought I'll take you along with it. And the reason I wanted to do it now in particular is that I'm hoping Father Christmas is going to bring me another bookcase. I'll show you my setup as we go through, but it's getting very full at the minute, so fingers crossed that Santa's going to make an IKEA trip this year, which means that the way it looks will change quite a lot in the new year. So I thought I'll capture this now and I will take you along with me. Before we get started though, a few quickfire questions from Instagram. These pop up all the time, so we're going to do them really quickly now. I've already answered this. Where are the bookshelves from? They're from IKEA. It's the good old Billy bookshelf. I've got one big one and one that is half the size. And the plan is to get another one of these ones, which is half the size, move it all along and put that on the other side. So it looks a little bit more symmetrical. Have you read all the books on your bookshelf? I've read the majority of books on my bookshelf. I have a TBR pile which I'll show you, and there are a few of the classics, you can't see them on the top shelf, that I haven't read yet, but all of these ones, they have been read, yes. Do you keep all of your books? No. I only keep the books that I'm going to reread, and again I'll show you my little pile of books that are to go and I'll tell you what I do with them. I only keep a book if I know I'm going to reread it. What's your go-to genre? This has evolved a lot over the last few years. So I was very into YA, I still am. YA is always going to have a place in my heart, and especially now I find that I enjoy it more as an adult because YA literature, YA fiction is becoming so much more diverse and inclusive, and it just makes my heart sing. I love it so much. I love that that's a progression that's beginning to happen. I am very much a fan of contemporary books. Unpopular opinion, but historical doesn't really appeal to me that often. I do sometimes go for dystopian, but my go-to is always contemporary reads. I really enjoy literary fiction, but I need to have the brain space to read it, which I don't always have, and I don't always get to do that as often as I'd like to. I will say here actually, I've got a whole other video about my reading habits and how they've changed as I've acquired my chronic illness, because my relationship with reading has changed a lot, so I will link that somewhere and link it below. This question pops up all the time and I had no idea it was so controversial, but people said, why divide it by colour and not by author/series? And my answer to that is it's mostly done by colour and it's not done by author, but I do keep some of my series together and I'll show you that as we go through it. I've found a way to get the best of both worlds, I would hope. And the last question is, do you choose books that fit your colour scheme? And my answer is no, absolutely not, because that right there would be judging a book by its cover, and we do not do that around here. I think it's reading YA that lends itself well to this approach because the YA covers are always so beautiful, but I feel very lucky. My books are probably my most prized possessions. I really treasure reading, it's something that's really important to me. And I find myself on this sofa horizontally lots and lots of time, again due to chronic illness, and even on the poorliest days, looking up at my bookshelf just makes my heart so full of joy and it brings me so much happiness. And I hope that comes across in this video. I feel like I should say as well, I know how lucky I am to have a beautiful collection like this, and I really hope I'll be lucky enough to keep adding to it over the years as well. Oh, I should add that actually, this is not all of the books from my lifetime. I got rid of most of my children's books, which is so silly, and then my parents have some at home in Sheffield. I've got one or two on here, but right, you can tell I'm going to take this seriously because I'm going to move the sofa so we can get a bit closer. So I'm going to move the sofa, have a lie down to recover, and then I'll be back. Right, where's my stool? Oh, I'm still not tall enough. Hang on, I'm gonna try this another way. Right, I'm stood on my stool and I've forgotten something really important that I need to say. I am sometimes lucky enough to receive copies of books or proofs from publishers and authors. So I think I'm supposed to disclose that somewhere. So what I'm going to do is if I pull out any of these books as I'm going along and picking out my favourites, if that happens to be one of those books, I will disclose it that way. So these are my black shelves. On the black bookshelf, I would point out these two books from Lauren James. I've talked about this a lot on YouTube already, but Lauren James is probably one of the most unique YA writers that's out there at the minute. I'm not big on like futuristic or dystopian stuff, but her concepts are so unique, and I've asked for Green Rising for Christmas as well. Gone with the Wind is the longest book I've ever read. I didn't love it, but my mum's favourite book in the world is the sequel to this called Scarlet, so I felt like I should at least read Gone with the Wind. Obviously we've got Wicked and the sequel, Son of a Witch. I've not read this one yet, I need to get on that. The Toy Makers is a beautiful book for this time of year. I'm filming this in December. It's a lovely, lovely festive read. Now, these classics along the top here are among the only books on this bookcase that I haven't read yet. I'm going to tell you more about Wordsworth Editions when I show you the other collection of books they sent, because they are among my most prized possessions, so I want to tell you about those properly. I'm going to level with you here. This little shelf here, which follows along from the black books on the main bookshelf, this is probably my least favourite shelf. But that's not to say there aren't some really cool books on it, like Big Panda and Tiny Dragon. This was part of some work I did with Penguin recently, and it's one of the most beautiful, profound books I've read in a really long time. Oh, Dry scared the life out of me. That is a YA read, and it's suspense, and it's by Shusterman and Shusterman. I think they're making a film of it now, but the book is well worth reading before the film comes out. Oh, this book here, Pigeon City, I got this from Barter Books in Alnwick when we went there earlier this year, and I picked it up and I found this little inscription in it. To Grandad with Love from John, Christmas 1963. How bananas is that? And the last one on here, Dew on the Grass. If you liked Anne of Green Gables, this is like a Welsh version of Anne of Green Gables. It's a classic that's often underrated, and it's a beautiful story about a little girl called Lucy. I've done one shelf and I already need a rest, so I think this is going to be a process filming this video. I'm glad I can edit this down and make it more coherent for you, because I think this is going to be a bit more time consuming than I thought. Next up we have pinky purpley books transitioning to red books, and then if we carry along we've got kind of beigey, peachy, creamy books. Is this gonna work? Oh, that kind of works, we'll go with that, it'll be fine. So, ready pinky books, let's see, what have we got on here? Okay, first of all, Dancing Shoes and Ballet Shoes by Noelle Stretfield, whose name I only found out I was saying wrong an embarrassingly short time ago, even though these are probably... These two books right here, I'm going to get them out. These are probably among my most prized possessions. As you can see, they are very well loved. I've read these over and over and over since I was very, very tiny. And again, they are comfort reads. Ballet Shoes is very well known, but Dancing Shoes, I've read other books by the same author, but Dancing Shoes is a very close second for me. And this one I don't think always gets the acclaim it deserves, because it just gives me good feels. It gives me good feels, and when I don't know what to read, I generally turn to these two. I probably read them at least once a year, and I'm 27 now, so that's a lot of that's a lot of times over. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert is a non-fiction book which made me pick up the pen and start writing at a time when I didn't think I had it in me anymore, and I think I'm going to try and read this again over Christmas, because I could do with that again right now. We have The Prom, which is the book that's based on the Broadway musical, but I read the book before. I've obviously not seen the musical in person, but I read this before the version on, was it Netflix or Amazon Prime, where the movie came out. Either way, I read the book before I watched the movie, and that's a beautiful, beautiful story. I'm trying very, very hard to not get every single book down and tell you about it. It's taken an amount of self-control I didn't anticipate, but I don't want this to be too long, but I could talk about these books all day. Just As Long as We're Together by Judy Blume is one of very, very few books that I've kept from my teenage years, and this was another one that I went back to time and time again, you might be able to tell. And I never quite pinpointed what it was. There was just something about this one that kept calling me back. It's a story about friendship and just like the anguish that comes from discovering that somebody's keeping secrets from you and growing up and discovering your identity. I really want to read this one again now. This is a dangerous video to film. I'm going to be doing nothing but reading from now on. I bought Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker because sleep deprivation and sleep disturbance is a big part of my chronic illness, but instead of telling you how to improve your sleep, it more tells you about the devastating impacts of a lack of sleep. So I didn't actually take anything away from this apart from a deep-rooted fear about how my lack of sleep is probably going to affect me in later life. Lobsters by Tom, Ellen and Lucy Iverson, and also Freshers by these same authors, is one of the most hilarious books I've ever read. It takes a lot for a book to make me laugh out loud, but these two that I've read by these authors are just iconic. Really, really brilliant. If you're about to start university or you're a student and you don't quite know where to dip your toe in when it comes to fiction, really recommend work by these authors. Carrying on along here, we have some copies of John Green's most well-known books. My friend Katie gave me these copies years and years ago, and she covered them herself. So I've got this really nice set of matching colours, which is really beautiful. And I just thought that was a really thoughtful gift as well. A Thousand Splendid Suns broke my heart into tiny little pieces. What else do we have? The Coincidence Authority is one of the most unique stories I've read in a long time. That was one of my favourite reads of 2020, and that was a really compelling story with quite not a twist, but something that happened at the end that made me go, oh my god. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, and in fact Brené Brown's work in general changed my life, and I'm going to write more about that at some point, so I'll save that for then. But yeah, that book has changed me for the better. And I'm lastly going to point out Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which is an adult fiction book. It's a romance and it has a protagonist who is black and chronically ill, and it's probably the most accurate representation of chronic illness I've seen in a fiction character. So while it's not my usual go-to book, I really appreciated what she was doing, the author, and I'm really keen to read the other two books in the series as well. Next up we have Orange and Yellow books, and I have to say I think yellow books are the best books, and I'm not just saying that because my book is a yellow book. I've always been particularly drawn to yellow books. And then if we carry on, we've got the first of my series and a couple of green books as well. The Overstory. Wow, do I want to get any closer? Hang on. The Overstory by Richard Powers has to be one of the best books I've ever read. I saw a lot of people talking about it and I did feel quite intimidated by the size of it, and it's very literary fiction. There are lots of characters and the characters have nicknames, so it takes a bit of brain power to keep on top of it. But it's one of the most beautiful, insightful books I've ever read. And I think the thing that makes him unique as an author is the fact that he combines elements of like neuroscience and neurology and psychology with more literary ideas about nature and the outdoor world. When I'm reading his stuff, I feel at peace, even if there's all kinds of chaotic stuff happening. And The Overstory was the start of that for me. Digging to America by Anne Tyler is another one of very few books that I kept from when I was a teenager. I remember I read this while I was doing my GCSEs, and I think it was part of an English assignment, and I remember reading it and just being completely drawn in by the story. It's about two tiny Korean babies that are delivered to two very different families in Baltimore. They're adopted by those families, and it's about the differences in how they're raised and bigger discussions about culture and immersion, and I think to an extent performative culture as well, looking back on it now. This is a book I could read over and over again. Sophia Thacker is primarily a spoken word poet. But this collection, I think this was gifted. I think I need to say this was gifted. I believe it might have been from Walker Books. But this is a collection of written poetry, and you know those books that you just read at the right time? You read it and you think, I needed to hear that. Even though we have no real experience in common, and she's obviously reflecting on experiences as a black woman that I will never understand or be able to relate to, of course. Some of this just resonated so much, and I believe it would resonate with so many people, and this is a book that I turned to again when I was in that same headspace and I felt like I needed it again. Really, really brilliant. And if I show you the back, I don't know if you can see, it says, I am surprised that my jaw has not unhinged itself with the amount of me I keep under my tongue. And I just thought, oh my god, she is so talented. She's amazing to follow on Instagram as well. Girl Out of Water by Nat Lertzimer. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this is the first book I've ever read that had a character with Emmy in it, where the Emmy was represented in a realistic way. It was not the main character, it's a secondary character, but I read it and I didn't know in advance. I wanted to read the book anyway, so I picked it up and I was like, whoa! But it just goes to show how little chronic illness is underrepresented in fiction at the minute, especially YA, so that made me really happy as well. You can kind of see these from there, can't you? Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury is a timeless read and one that I really wish I'd read sooner. Moonrise by Sarah Crossan, and actually one by Sarah Crossan, which is further down. Sarah Crossan writes in prose, and I love her work so much. I would never before have thought that reading a whole book in prose would hit me as hard as it did, but in both of those cases I was very much mistaken. I need to stop talking through. I'm trying to be selective, but I just want to talk about all the books. Now, Flawed is unique in that it was written by seven different YA authors. Each of them represented a character, and I believe it takes place over 7 years. And it's about these 7 characters who find themselves stuck in a lift together where something quite tragic happens on their first day of work experience. Again, it's a really compelling story, and it tackles different situations from lots of different viewpoints and mindsets, and it has a disabled character in, which again is slightly groundbreaking still at the minute, unfortunately. Hopefully one day that won't seem as big of a deal as it does at the minute. I'm only halfway through the yellows and I'm going to have another sit down. This is how we do things around here. Please read this leaflet carefully. It's written by Karen Haviland, who is an author with endometriosis, and that is a really creative take on chronic illness, which starts in recent times and it travels back to the author's childhood, and that's a really unique and insightful take on especially the challenges that come with adapting your identity as illness sets in. I look like a bit of a lurker like this, don't I? But we'll go with it. Anne of Green Gables we need to talk about, because I will tell you right now, Anne of Green Gables is one of my all-time favourite books, and I was really excited to read the rest of the series. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books in total, and I thought, oh my gosh, my favourite book has 7 more instalments, this is the best thing ever. And then I started reading them, and the first one, Anne of Avonlea, I thought, okay, yeah, not as good as the first, but fine. But then each of these books after that progressively broke my heart a little bit more. They really did. And again, maybe I want to write about this at some point, but it just made me so sad. And I know it reflects the time they were written in, but it made me so sad that this unique, quirky girl, this really strong female character, as she grows up and moves through life, she loses a little bit more, and she begins to conform more and more with what was expected of women at the time, and all of her wants and all of her needs suddenly became redundant in comparison to her husband and her children, so much so that the last couple of books completely focus on the children, and the bits where Anne is in, it's like she's any other person. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but it actually made me really sad. I'll always love the first one though. The first one is always going to have a place in my heart, and this is by no means unique to this series because I've got other ones down there that we need to talk about as well. But I'd be interested to know if anybody else who reads and loves Anne of Green Gables, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. Next to that I have a little jam jar, and that's just full of bookmarks. Most of them are just freebies that I pick up from places. Because you can never have too many bookmarks. And then we've just got a couple of green books, including Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Again, probably saying that wrong. That's a really iconic book. That was one of the first really good YA books I can remember reading. Boy by Roald Dahl. Again, I'm not big on autobiographies, but this one, which focuses on his childhood, I couldn't put it down. It was so fascinating, and it just shows how much of his early life experiences influenced what he went on to write, so I found that really cool. Next along we have the blue books, going into the kind of turquoise, maybe pale green sort of territory. And then along here we also have some white books as well. What I'm wondering is whether I can get away with sitting down. Oh no, it's not going to work, is it? Right, I've got some sort of a kneeling situation going on here, so we're going to go with that and it's going to be fine. Kicking off blue books, we've got The Echo Maker, which is my second or third favourite book by Richard Powers of the 3 I've read. This is a book, I've talked about this on YouTube before. It's about a main character who has Capgras syndrome, and that essentially means that he no longer believes that his sister who is visiting him in hospital is actually his sister. He believes that it's an imposter who's been transplanted into an exact replica of his sister, and that's just the tip of the story. There's so much more, but it was a really, again, I thought that was a really cool example of how Richard Powers takes the neurological phenomenons, yes, and combines it with something like the nature and the habits of the cranes, which are the birds that are a really central part to the story as well. Crippled by Frances Ryan. Frances Ryan is one of the people I most look up to in the world, and she wrote this book, and it's not an easy read. It's not an easy read, especially as a disabled person, but it is an important read. It's about austerity and the current climate that disabled people are facing in the UK. The Swish of the Curtain is a book in kind of a similar vein to Ballet Shoes and Dancing Shoes. It's by Pamela Brown, and I think it was first published in the 1940s, and it's a gloriously stagey story. And I remember reading somewhere that the royalties made from this book put Pamela Brown through theatre school, which was her ambition, and I thought that was really cool as well. I have to say as well, these books on this bit of my bookshelf make me so happy because, like I said, I don't choose books based on their colour, but it's such a nice transitional shade. It's just such a beautiful colour, and it makes me really happy that that's the bit I can most often see with my eyes. This is the book I'm reading at the minute. I put it on before I started filming. That's the only adjustment I made. And this is The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat, and it's by Oliver Sacks, who was a neurologist, and it's basically a collection of case histories from some of his most interesting patients, but as well as the neurology and the psychology behind it, which, as you might have guessed by now, I'm really into, and I love reading that kind of stuff. There are postscripts added on, and they go far beyond the biological and the physiological elements of this, and they discuss how the things this person has seen relate to a person's sense of character and identity and how they interact with the world. And I think at the time where this first came out, that must have been such a revolutionary concept. Yeah, ideas that were really ahead of their time, I think. Really enjoying this. It's taken quite a lot of brain power. It's taken me much longer to read than a book normally does, but well worth it, I think. The Kite Runner also broke my heart into tiny little pieces, enough said. My friend Anna told me to read that book. No! It was 1,000 Splendid Suns. My friend Anna told me to read that book for years and years and years, and I always put it off, and when I read it I was like, okay, I get why you were telling me now. The Leaving by Tara Altebrando. Again, this is an American story, and that's one that I've always held on to. A long time ago, 6 5-year-olds go missing without a trace. 11 years later, 5 come back with no memory of where they've been or who took them or why. And nobody knows where number 6 is. Maya Angelou and Still I Rise is a collection of poetry that I think everybody should read at least once. And similarly, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath is, of the classics I've read, that's the one that's really impacted me and the one that's really stayed with me. Arguably my favourite of the classics I've read so far. I'm just going to sit here for a little while. The Perks of Being a Wallflower was the first really, really good book that I ever read. It will always have a place in my heart. In fact, let me show you, because this copy is absolutely battered and I think I'm going to have to buy myself a new copy. This has been read multiple times. The thing is though, hang on. I have bought myself new copies of the books that I read over and over and that are about to fall apart because I'm worried I'm going to destroy them if I keep reading them. But when I go back to them and want to read them again, I find it really hard to pick up the new copy and not go to the old copy, because even though it's the exact same book, I'm still worried that somehow the experience isn't going to be the same. I'm not very good at reading books by male authors, but A Boy Made of Blocks by Keith Stewart is one that really stands out in my mind, and it's a story I remember quite vividly. Station 11 is essentially a book about a pandemic that was written long before the pandemic, so that'll scare the life out of you if that's what you're into. But it's got like a theatrical element to it as well, which is really, really cool. Dear Evan Hansen, I've seen the musical, I enjoyed the musical. I didn't love the musical as much as I was expecting to, and yet I read the book and I absolutely loved the book. I actually think I prefer the book to the musical, even though it came after the musical. Quiet by Susan Cain is another non-fiction book that changed my life, and I'm going to link a blog post below that's called Chronic Illness and Introversion Changing the Narrative, and that's going to be, well, that is a blog post. It's one of my most read posts on my blog, and that's about how my relation to introversion has changed as a result of chronic illness, and that was very much inspired by this book. Now then, the people who say, what about your series? This is where this comes into it. So as well as these beautiful editions, which I'll tell you about, I have some collections of series on this shelf. And from here onwards, the colour coordination goes down the drain, as you'll see. So before we jump into this series, I have 2 copies of my charity book. Now this is from a few years ago, and this is a book I compiled, and it was Lisa at Wallace Publishing which made this happen. It was an extraordinary act of kindness. She published this book for me, and she gets 50% of the sales revenue, and the other 50% I donate to charity. So it's got, you can still get this, by the way. You can get this on Amazon, and you can get this on Wallace Publishing. There's a link on my blog. It's diary style entries from people with a whole range of different chronic illnesses about their experiences. In the past, the sales were used to raise money for my social enterprise, Spoonie Survival Kits, which you might know about. but as that came to an end in February 2021, we donate the money now to Astrid, which is the wonderful small charity that I work for now. Oh, you can't see them very well, but next along is one of my all-time favourite series, and it's Mallory Towers by Enid Blyton. I have such a soft spot for these books. I don't know if you can see, I'm rereading them again at the minute, so I'm on number 3 at the minute. It's about a group of girls that are boarding school in Cornwall, but they're just so compelling and they're so comforting. I started reading this series because I was having a bit of a sad time recently, and as soon as I read it, it was like, you know, those books that just feel like a warm hug. And you'd better believe I'm going to watch the CBBC version, the CBBC TV adaptation, because if you're a fan of Mallory Towers and you haven't, what are you doing? Okay, this is the bit I've been most excited for, because now I get to tell you about this collection of books which are, I've said this so many times in this video alone, but these are some of my most prized possessions. These are the collector's editions of children's classics from Wordsworth Editions, and I will show you a couple. They are the most beautiful editions of children's classics that I have ever seen. Every cover is so beautiful, and they all have little quotes on the back from the individual books. These, and oh gosh, it still gives me all the feels just to say it. I started collecting these books a couple of years ago with a view to having the whole collection, and then last year, or maybe the year before, I got to work with the publisher, Wordsworth Editions, and as part of that they gifted me the rest of the series. Probably the day that box came with those books in was probably one of the happiest days of my life. That's no exaggeration. I just think they are absolutely, not only the stories themselves that make up the collection, but they're just the editions and how they all sit together like this, and it's such a beautifully curated selection. It's taken me a while to work through all of them. The only one I haven't read yet is Jane Eyre, and I've tried once, and for some reason I couldn't get into it, which is strange because I like the other Bronte books I've read. But I'm gonna try again this Christmas. I'm aware you might not be able to see the titles very well, so just to blitz through them, we've got The Secret Garden, A Christmas Carol, Pride and Prejudice, Peter Pan, The Railway Children, The Jungle Book, The Wind in the Willows, The Little Prince, The Great Gatsby, Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, Black Beauty, Little Women, Alice in Wonderland, Treasure Island and Anne of Green Gables. It's really hard to pick a favourite out of these because each one of them is absolutely, I can't emphasise enough how beautiful they are and how special they are to me, but Anne of Green Gables I think is probably my favourite cover. It has a quote on the back that says, "Life is worth living as long as there's a laugh in it." It's been so wonderful to connect with Wordsworth Editions, and the really cool thing now is that I get to guest blog for them occasionally as well, so not only do I get to read the books, I get to write about them as well. And yeah, one of the greatest things that has come out of blogging, one of my absolute favourite collaborations of all time, without a doubt. Moving along, okay, I'm going to scooch back. Am I going to scooch back? We'll have a go at a scooch back. Next along we have my collection of the Little Women series. They are the Virago Modern Classics editions. Little Women and Good Wives are the two that are usually sandwiched together and make up the traditional version of Little Women now as we think about it, the one that is most widely read. And again, when I found out there were 2 other books that I could then go and read, I thought, oh amazing, we're going to continue the story, that's so cool. And I read the other 2 and it was almost the same as Anne of Green Gables. The more the story went on, the more the characters, especially characters like Jo, I was surprised how much it impacted me to see them kind of settle and conform. And again, I know that's completely typical of the time it was written in, but it made me really, really sad. And then finally on this shelf back here, we have a collection of Noelle Streatfeld. I'm doubting myself even now, Streatfeld. I'm pretty sure it's Noelle Streatfeld, but please forgive me if I'm wrong. I have a collection of some of her other books. Like I said, Ballet Shoes is one of my favourite books of all time. In this collection there is also circus shoes, tennis shoes and theatre shoes. And circus shoes is the one second to ballet shoes which seems to be the most acclaimed. My brain just went no then. Circus shoes is the one that won awards and prizes and seems to be most popular. I didn't love circus shoes and I didn't love tennis shoes. I enjoyed them, but I wouldn't go screaming from the rooftops about them. But theatre shoes, and again, it's an absolute outrage that I didn't realise this sooner, but theatre shoes is in some ways like a continuation of ballet shoes. So it's set in the same ballet school. There are a lot of overlapping characters. And if you've read Ballet Shoes, the character Winifred from Ballet Shoes is kind of a big character in Theatre Shoes. And I didn't realise that before I started reading. And when it happened, I was like, oh my gosh, it was It was the coolest thing. The Fossil sisters aren't central in the story, but it touches on what happened to the Fossil sisters, especially as the World War happened. So it's definitely worth reading if you were a fan of ballet shoes. Definitely. Can you believe that it's not even 3 o'clock and I've had to switch a light on? Oh, can't be doing with this. I'm still perched on my little stool here, by the way, but I thought I'd move on to show you. This is kind of like a miscellaneous shelf. This follows on from my series over there. And these are all the books that didn't really work anywhere else, either because they're multicoloured or funny sizes or funny editions. Over at the end here we have A Girl Behind Dark Glasses and A Girl in One Room, and these are books written by my friend Jessica Taylor Bierman, and I believe at the time of filming this she has just finished writing her third and final one. And these are iconic because they document the experiences of somebody living with severe ME. We have 2 books here by Mindfully Evie. The first is Within These Four Walls, the second is Everything Is Always Changing, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is a third coming. Evie is another writer living with chronic illness in a form that's more severe than my own, and she is another voice that is so needed in the world at the minute. She has a really beautiful writing style. They are absolutely beautiful, and again I hope there's a third because I want to see what colour scheme she goes with next. Winnie the Pooh is a collection of stories that will always have a special place in my heart, and I've got some other editions that I'm going to show you in a minute. And then I've not actually read this one yet, but when I was having a bit of a tough time a couple of years ago, I went down to my letterbox and I found this from my friend Izzy, and it's What Would the Spice Girls Do? And personally, I think that's a question we should all be reflecting on in day-to-day life. Okay, my shelves get a bit higgledy-piggledy down here, but I can sit on the floor, so I'm happy enough. So there's a little pan over the hardbacks and the otherwise funnily shaped books which live on this slightly bigger shelf. I am not the biggest fan of reading hardbacks, and I would always choose, oh, you can't even see me, what am I doing? I don't necessarily think that including my face has enhanced this in any way, but here we are. Yeah, I would never choose a hardback over a paperback, but sometimes something comes out and you just can't resist. The Flatshare by Beth O'Leary was definitely one of those books. I was so keen to read this when I first heard about it, and it definitely didn't disappoint. Another book I wanted to show you is Generation W. I was invited to be one of 100 contributors who are defined as iconic women, revealing what it was like to live through the 100-year anniversary of when women first began to receive the vote for the first time in the UK. I thought they'd got the wrong person when I got the email. It was published by Urban Kingdom, and if you have it, my interview is on page 229. If you follow me on Instagram, the chances are you will have seen me talking about A Still Life by Josie George. This is another book that I really needed to read. It's absolutely beautiful, and I don't think I'll do it justice if I sit here and talk about it, so I'm going to leave a link to the Instagram post where I talk about it and the quite profound impact it had on me. You best believe I've got my mum Tracy Beaker. I was a Tracy Beaker fangirl growing up. I was very much in the Tracy Beaker era. The Unexpected Joy of the Ordinary is a book my best friend made me read. It's by Catherine Gray, and it taught me about a concept known as the hedonic treadmill. It was a concept I could immediately relate to, and I wrote a whole blog post about that as well, so I'm going to leave that link below as well. I am definitely going to say this author's name wrong, but this is one of the best books I've read this year. It's called There's No Such Thing as an Easy Job, and it's by Kikuko Tsumiura. It's a Japanese author, and this is the translated version by Polly Barton. And it's about a worker living in Japan who is burned out beyond burned out, and she specifically requests a job at an employment agency which requires no writing or thinking or demanding occupations whatsoever. And the assignments that she gets sent on are really eerie and begin to paint a wider picture, and it's really cool. Similarly, right next to it we have Sanatorium by Abby Palmer, which is another one of the favourite books I read this year. I specifically seek out books by disabled and chronically ill authors, as you might have guessed. But it's basically a young woman spends a month taking the waters at a thermal water-based rehabilitation facility in Budapest, and she comes home and she tries to replicate that in an inflatable bathtub in her flat in London. And it's written in a really unique way, and on the surface it's a very easy and accessible read, but the ideas are complex and they really make you stop and think. And finally, The Split. This was also a proof copy. It's by Laura Kay. It was her first novel, and she has such a humorous and witty writing style, so I'm really looking forward to reading what she comes out with next. And this one, I grew up in Sheffield, and this book, being mostly set in Sheffield, gave me so much nostalgia. It was almost unbelievable. It really got me there. Oh, and it's about a woman who breaks up with her girlfriend and essentially runs off with the girlfriend's cat. That's where the story stems from. The cat's called Malcolm. I approve. Now, this shelf is a funny one, and you'll have to excuse how close I am because I'm like wedged in between the shelf and the back of the sofa right now because I couldn't be bothered to pull it all the way out. On this shelf are some spare copies of my book, which is called University and Chronic Illness, A Survival Guide. It's a non-fiction book which came out in 2020, just before the pandemic, and it's based on my experiences of navigating higher education with a chronic illness. It's basically packed with information and all the things I wish somebody had told me, and it goes beyond just the academic side of university, and it talks about student life, like socialising, independent living, managing your money. So I have these copies here because if somebody buys one off my website and they ask for it to be signed or annotated or to have a little message in it, I can do that from here. Which is why I've got my pens there for easy access as well. We have this very cute bookend. It's from Sass & Bell. I really struggle to find nice bookends that I like, so if you have any recommendations, please let me know because I'm desperate to find some new ones. And then over here we have my TBR pile, which is looking a little bit shorter than usual at the minute, but that's definitely not a bad thing. So the books I haven't read yet live here, and when I've read them, they will be delegated elsewhere to find their home. I will say this one arrived from Penguin the other day. This is a proof copy. It comes out in February 2022 and it's called The Secret of Haven Point, and it's by Lizette Orton, who I've followed on Twitter for absolutely years. It's her debut book. I am so excited to read that book. I really am. It's got disabled characters as heroes, it's middle grade, and we love to see it. Right, we're nearly done. Bottom shelf, we've got the higgledy-piggledy ones along here, and then we've got something separate on the last little shelf, which I will show you in a minute. Now these are the big books. These are the chunky boy books that don't fit anywhere else. First of all, over here we have 2 copies of the complete collection of Winnie the Pooh. This one I've had since I was a baby, and this one my best friend Izzy got me for my most recent birthday. Like I said, Winnie the Pooh really has a special place in my heart. If I remember, I will show you the illustrations I have up on my wall next to my bookshelf as well. Down here we also have a collection of little magazines. These are magazines I've been lucky enough to have some of my writing in. I really want to find a better way of keeping these as well, so if you have any ideas I'd love to know. Next we have 2 cookbooks, which is actually hilarious because I don't cook. I'm starting to, but I'm definitely not the best, and I'm usually allergic to most of the stuff in these recipe books, but I felt the urge, so I got both of them on sale actually, so I can't really complain. Skincare by Caroline Hirons, again, felt compelled to get it, definitely learned some things from it. And all of my friends have been borrowing this one as well. Then also a bit random, but this is Rob Brydon's book from years and years ago. I'm gonna say 2010 roughly. But the reason I've kept this is because we met him. Me and my friend Lauren went to Meadowhall and we met Rob Brydon and he signed my book. So that's the sort of thing I feel like you should hold on to, and it was a really enjoyable book when I read it as well. Next we have this little higgledy-piggledy stack. On top we have Speak Out. Long story short, I have a mentor from the Prince's Trust. I've been having enterprise mentoring for coming up to 2 years now, so I'm about to finish the programme. And I have a mentor called Duncan, and over the course of that mentoring and during lockdown he wrote this really handy little book called Speak Out. This is a beautiful Puffin in Bloom edition of Little Women, and I'm really hoping I can collect the rest of the Puffin in Bloom editions. Even though I've read most of the books, I would really love to have these beautiful editions of them as well. This is the Writer and Artist Yearbook. This is the staple book for anybody who is trying to get published in a particular year. I have the 2019 version because that's when I started pitching my book to publishers, and it is holy grail level for any aspiring authors, although they're not cheap, so I do advise getting them secondhand if you can. And this is a copy of Heidi, and I like the book, but I really don't like this copy of Heidi because it's just a bit of an awkward shape and it doesn't really fit anywhere, so it's just kind of here at the minute. But I believe Heidi is part of the Puffin in Bloom collection, so if I do get those I will probably get rid of this one. You might have seen in a previous vlog that I was lucky enough to get do some work with Disney, and I got a little press delivery from Disney, which is probably one of the greatest things that has ever happened to me. And as much as I absolutely adored the stuff that was inside the parcel, I loved the box. The box was my favourite bit, the box that it came in, so I've kept the box down here, and I'm not sure what I'm going to put in it yet, but it kind of looks like a big book. And it's just a box that opens up here, and I just feel like that's going to come in so handy for something, so I'm definitely hanging on to that, and it makes me really happy. So people ask whether I keep all of the books on my bookshelf, and my answer was no, I get rid of the ones I don't like. So down here we have almost like a little outbox, and these are the books that I am going to get rid of, that I've read and I didn't like, or I've given up on halfway through. I hope none of the titles in this pile are too offensive for anybody. That one is only because I've got another copy. Somebody got me a copy not realising I already had one. The reason I save these up and collect them is that because when I have a few, there's a really gorgeous organisation in York called Bookcase for All. They essentially provide books to vulnerable people in the area, so people who are homeless, who are going through conflict. So I save these up, and when I've got a few, they will come and collect them. Which is really handy for me because I can't always get out and about as much as I'd like to, and books are heavy and my limbs are a bit useless. So that's what I do with those. They're a really great organisation. I'm going to link them down below as well in case there's anybody local who's watching. And then finally, goodness me, we have this final little corner of the bookshelf, and in here are all of my theatre programmes that I've saved over the years. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through them now, but if for any reason you have been committed enough to see this video to the end, I would really like to do kind of like a theatre programme sorting, going through my theatre collection, answering theatre questions sort of video in the new year maybe. I just keep all my theatre programmes in these little magazine files down here. Do you know, I'm not even going to get up to film an outro. I'm just perched on my little stool down here. I did not expect that to take as long as it did, or to wipe me out as much as it did. With rest breaks, I have been filming this for 3.5 hours. I hope it's been somewhat interesting. I have absolutely no idea if it is. It's just been me wittering on about books. But if you have any of your own recommendations, if you've read any of these books, feel free to leave a comment because I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts. For now though, I'm going to have a big rest. I'm going to have some water, get my feet elevated and go and take care of myself now because I might have been a little bit overambitious today. But thank you very, very much for watching this, especially if you've made it to the end of this one. You can subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time.